that people are doing. So for this comparison, I guess there's really not much of an introduction needed because it's pretty straightforward. The OnePlus 11, it has been unexpectedly incredible when it comes to photography. There are a lot of camera comparisons, check them out using the link in the description. And as compared to the iPhone, yeah, the videography, I have very high expectations, quite simply put. So yeah, let's see exactly how it's gonna fare. Alright, so I've actually been looking forward to this one because, well, I've heard a lot of good things about the OnePlus 11's videography. And by the way, if you want to check out any of the photography comparisons for the OnePlus 11 or the iPhone 14 Pro, of course, check out the links in the description. There's a lot of them and they are pretty damn interesting, especially on the OnePlus 11 because it's got some serious photography skills going on right there. But in terms of videography, well, let's face it, the iPhone is probably the best out there right now. We have to check out against the S23 Ultra, especially with the OnePlus. But yeah, anyways, point is that I'm not the biggest fan of the iPhone. If you've seen any of my camera comparisons, you'd know that for a fact, because the iPhone, it just doesn't have good HDR with photography, and photography is a big deal for me. And so for me and people like me, the iPhone is just not a good choice. But videography, even I cannot deny the fact that the videography is incredible on the iPhone. So, well, we'll have to see how it goes with the OnePlus. At least in selfies, I can basically guarantee that it's not going to be as good because the iPhone has full 4K and goes up to 4K 60. So you really have proper 4K good quality video on the selfie cameras. And even in 2023, why do we still have 1080p on the OnePlus? It makes no sense. Right, now we are testing out the cinematic video on the iPhone versus a portrait video on the OnePlus 11. It's the same thing, of course. And you know, I've said this before as well, but I've never really been a huge advocate for cinematic or bokeh video on smartphones, whether it's front or back, because quite simply I've just always noticed the imperfections, and it bothers me a lot. Because in my opinion, if you really want to get that beautiful bokeh in the background, you want your smartphone video to look like it was taken on a professional camera, well, you can't really expect to have imperfections now, can you? And whenever you do, it looks blatantly unprofessional. And maybe it's just my opinion, but I don't know, I'm not really the biggest fan of it. You know, I don't ever really recommend using it, even on something like the iPhone, which does have pretty fantastic portrait video or cinematic video. Well, I still think that the imperfections just destroys the whole thing. And until that gets basically perfect, you know, it's a huge challenge to perfect it. But until that happens, you know, I'm never gonna be sold. So, selfie video, well, I'm gonna keep this short because I really went on there while shooting the selfie video. But yeah, anyways, the iPhone, undoubtedly, it takes it for the video quality. You know, it has perfect exposure, the details are beautiful, there's no over sharpening or artifacts that I see quite a lot of on the OnePlus 11. Then of course, for audio quality, I think it's very close. Like, OnePlus definitely ramped up their game a little bit, at least for audio, so that's nice. And it was a pretty similar story when it came to cinematic video. Now, the OnePlus had sharper edges but also a lot of imperfections, and I already explained why I don't like cinematic video as such. Same goes for the iPhone. You know, it definitely has a lot of softness around the edges and it doesn't really look all that professional, in a manner of speaking. That's basically my thoughts on the selfie video. Now let's move on to the rear cameras. So when it comes to 4K 30 with the main cameras, of course, I think the iPhone edges out the OnePlus 11 by a little bit. It's not a massive difference, and for a phone that costs half the price of the iPhone, I think the video quality is pretty damn good on the OnePlus. But yeah, there are certain things like the overall stabilization, the smoothness in the movement when we shoot the video, and then of course there's the overall look of the video too. The balance and the contrast, the exposure, everything looks very good and very natural on the iPhone. Now, overall, the OnePlus is doing a very good job with the white balance, given that this was sort of during sunset, so the warmth is well maintained, all that jazz. The detail levels are very close. We will do a proper details test real soon. But then when it comes to the ultra-wide camera, I actually believe that the differences like the stabilization and even the detail level, like the raw quality of the video, it's very close on both. That's probably because the OnePlus 11 has a slightly higher quality sensor, so that hardware advantage actually really helps even things out. But unlike the main camera, you can see that the OnePlus is really cooling things off a lot. iPhone right here, it has perfect white balance, and I also think there were certain instances, not all of them, but there were definitely certain instances when the iPhone handled the exposure really well and it really maintained good contrast whilst also preserving more highlights. And as for focusing, well, this was sort of a concern for me initially, at least before I saw the video for the OnePlus. And I must say, the OnePlus's focusing, it is very good. As you can see, I'm moving the camera around, there's a bit of wind blowing, and you know, the focusing, the racking of the focus, everything works very fast. Honestly, I'm very impressed by the focusing of the OnePlus 11. I don't think you're gonna have any issues when you're trying to shoot any kind of close-up subjects. Now for the iPhone, well, obviously is going to nail the focusing. That was never gonna be a debate now, was it? Now as for how versatile your camera can get, well, the OnePlus 11 is not quite good at it. First of all, we have the obvious slider zoom that we get here. We cannot really choose a zoom level by just tapping a button. We have to slide into it, and I'm not the biggest fan of that. Another issue that I'm facing quite a lot here is that the 2x zoom, it almost feels like OnePlus is just cropping in from the main sensor. I don't really understand why, because we get a pretty high quality 2x zoom sensor that does work really well with photography. I've checked it out and tested it out against various cameras, and it does look and work really well. So I don't know why it's not being properly utilized in video. Now when it comes to the iPhone, well, the versatility is actually quite good, but only in the medium zoom range. The reason I say that is because you have the ultra wide, you have the main camera, and then you get a 2x sensor crop. So that's basically optical quality. It's not 100% there. I would say about 90%, and that's gonna be good enough for most cases. Then of course you get the 3x. If you want to go any further, that's when you're going to run into problems. Obviously there is no more optical zoom going any further, so the quality is going to drop. Now when it comes to 4K 60, we are using the main cameras on both right here, and I think it's pretty damn obvious that the OnePlus has a bit of an issue. You guys can see it probably. It's the stabilization. It takes a pretty massive hit, and especially when you compare it to something like the iPhone 14 Pro, which has impeccable stabilization even with 4K 60. You can really see a disadvantage on the OnePlus 11. But believe me when I say, that is hardly the worst part about 4K 60. We cannot use the ultra-wide camera with 4K 60 on the OnePlus 11. And I honestly have zero idea why that is the case. It's almost like an oversight at this point, because it's 2023. We should be capable of using 4K 60 on every single camera module that we have on any given smartphone. That includes the front camera, by the way, which also the OnePlus cannot use. But speaking of options, yes, the OnePlus does not give you 4K 60, but it does give you 8K video with the main camera. Now, once again, curiously, you cannot use 8K with the ultra-wide, which is just, it's odd. The OnePlus's ultra-wide is capable of both 4K 60 and 8K from a technical standpoint. The 8K video, it is stable, it doesn't really have any crop. You may lose out on a little bit of dynamic range and all that, but it looks really nice for 8K video, that's what I'm saying, and it definitely kicks it up a notch when it comes to details. At least as long as you have really good lighting. That's one of the things that you really need if you want nice high quality 8K video. And then ultra steady video on the OnePlus versus of course the fabled action mode. I mean, at this point at least I would say the iPhone has probably one of the, if not the best, action mode or super steady video on any smartphone thus far. Just plain and simple, you get a fairly high resolution 2.8K versus just 1080p on the OnePlus, and you get insanely good stabilization as you would expect. And the fact that it has such high quality, the fact that you can actually use this and still get away with it and get fairly nice quality video. It won't be quite as good as 4K 30 obviously, but yeah, I would say for the most part both are good in the stabilization department, but the quality alone makes the iPhone leap ahead by a lot. Hell, if anything, in some cases I'm actually seeing a little bit more jerking on the OnePlus as opposed to the iPhone. And now finally, let us take a look at HDR, or more precisely Dolby Vision recording on the iPhone 14 Pro. Almost everyone on the planet knows that the iPhone 14 Pro's HDR recording, it looks good. It looks fantastic to say the least. Now you're looking at the SDR transcoded version. It doesn't look nearly as nice and as beautiful as it did when I was viewing this directly on the iPhone screen. The OnePlus on the other hand, it doesn't give you an actual HDR mode as such, like HDR10 Plus, Dolby Vision, nothing like that, but it gives you something called AI highlights. Basically, it'll use software to produce a pseudo HDR-esque look, giving you more dynamic range, better overall details, and honestly it is performing insanely well here. In some cases more details and better sharpness on the OnePlus 11 and a lot of the shadows, and that's massive in my opinion. I think OnePlus has a home run right here, because not only is it easily keeping up with the dynamic range of the iPhone, but in a lot of cases, like once again detail preservation, sharpness, it's actually pulling ahead. But speaking of detail preservation, yeah, we gotta hop indoors for this one. So we're gonna put our phones on a tripod and then try to frame it exactly the same, and then we zoom in all the way to 500%. As you can see, I did use tap to focus. The detail levels, it's close. It is very close, but I think the iPhone is edging it out by just a touch. I mean, both of them seem to have some grain, some noise, some sharpening artifacts as well. The iPhone just has a touch more detail in the textures. I mean, it's a minor difference. At 400%, you're probably not gonna notice an actual difference when you're using it in the real world. But of course, OnePlus does have a little bit of an ace up its sleeve. I'm talking about 8K video. Now, you can use 8K even when you're walking around, even when you're shooting videos handheld. So a pretty obvious question is, how well does the detail level stack up? Unfortunately, disappointingly, it's not a massive difference. You know, the 4K 30 on the OnePlus 11 did an almost similar level of a good job. I mean, in some cases, it almost looks like the OnePlus is smearing things a little bit. It could be because of the fact that this was an indoors lighting, so technically imperfect, as opposed to the bright daylight that you might try and shoot 8K in. That could be the case, but you know, it really limits the range in which you can use 8K, even though it does have good stabilization. So yeah, definitely something to keep in mind. But then we also need to take a look at the ultra wide camera. So once again, zooming in all the way to 500%, and there's an interesting difference. So the OnePlus seems to have a little bit more noise and grain and less sharpening artifacts, while the iPhone, it is reducing the noise a little bit better, definitively, and it is also sharpening the video a little bit more. Now I can see a few sharpening artifacts as well, so you know, it's not perfect, but you know, the detail difference, it's not night and day. I wouldn't say that anyone would actually be bothered by the minor differences that we can see here, but this is a comparison and the iPhone does look a little bit better in my opinion. Now finally, let us move on to nighttime video. Yeah, as you can see, I'm using 4K 30 on both, and one of the biggest things that I really like on the iPhone is that it is very consistent in terms of how well it manages stabilization. Now there are some jerks that are definitely making it into the iPhone's video, but not nearly as much as the OnePlus. That alone makes me prefer the iPhone, but man, the noise reduction on the iPhone, they really knock that out the park. Especially with the main camera, it's like undeniably incredible on the iPhone. I don't know how much you guys can see in terms of the noise levels on the OnePlus, but the sky looks insanely clean on the iPhone, and that's definitely not the case on the OnePlus. But the moment I opened my camera up and tried to shoot this video, well, OnePlus recommended that I should turn on AI highlights. Apparently, it helps with dark situations and nighttime video. I was curious, so I took it, and I guess in a way it helps in making darker situations look dark, because that's essentially what it's trying to do. It's trying to darken the shadows a little bit more, making it look more like nighttime. But what disappoints me more than anything else is that not only do we get a weird artifact that constantly goes over the screen, I mean, I can see it very clearly. Maybe it's because we have streetlights above us and there's a bit of lens flaring action that's happening, so it's interfering with the processing. But what I'd really hoped from this pseudo nighttime video that we're getting on the OnePlus 11 is that it would have helped with the noise reduction. That's not happening. And then for the ultra-wide nighttime video, well, I generally just take this and say that, well, it doesn't really look very nice because it's low light, and ultra-wide cameras need a lot of light even during the daytime to give you good quality video. And that remains the same. I don't think I'm going to be changing my mind anytime soon now. I mean, in terms of differences, I guess I could say the OnePlus has a little bit more detail as opposed to the iPhone, probably because of a slightly better sensor, but the iPhone does have better stabilization. And now, lastly, we have slow motion. Needless to say, both of these look incredible. I am very bummed out by the fact that we don't get 4K 120 on the OnePlus any longer. There was a time when we used to get 4K 120. I believe it was the OnePlus 9 Pro that had it. So yeah, it's unfortunate OnePlus 11 doesn't have it, but 1080p-240 still looks fantastic. As you can see, it's very close to the iPhone, but I do think the iPhone has overall more detail. I can see more details, especially as the bubbles are forming and all that, as opposed to the OnePlus 11. And so with that said, we are at the end of our camera comparison. I'll admit, I've been fairly critical about the OnePlus, especially because I'm comparing this one to a phone that costs much more than double the price of the OnePlus 11. So yeah, I get that, but my expectations were also pretty damn high because of just how well OnePlus performed in the photography department. But I guess, you know, this is gonna be one of those areas where, because it's a flagship killer and a much lower priced smartphone from OnePlus, you know, we're gonna have some sacrifices. This seems like one of the areas here. I mean, it's not bad. You're still gonna get plenty good 4K video, but it's not going to blow your mind or win any awards as such. But having said that, there are more video comparisons, and I'm also planning to do the review soon enough for the OnePlus 11. I'll be catching you guys soon enough with those. Cheers.